Hello, my name is Maximus, and it's tea time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tea Time. This is the continuation for story time. This is part two. If you can notice over here to the right, the fireplace isn't on. For whatever reason, the Chromecast has decided it's not going to work. So we're just going to have to deal with these images from Google. But other than that, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. So, if I remember correctly, I ended it off at Las Cruces, New Mexico. This was the trip that I took to Arizona about a year back. I'm going to go up until I get to the Lost Dutchman State Park. If I remember correctly, I ended off with how the camp at Las Cruces was. So, I woke up the next morning. Same thing, did my routine, having breakfast, packed up the bike, took a couple of photos, and then I went back onto the road heading west. So I made it to the city Lordsburg. It's still in considered New Mexico, but I want to say it's like one of the close bordering cities to Arizona. When I got there, my GPS gave me two options. I could either go through Tuscan to Phoenix and then to the Lost Dutchman State Park, or I can take this other route, which was, I think, maybe a few minutes faster than this route. And without looking, or I didn't even have a chance to adjust it, it went and automatically decided for me that I was going to take this other route. And it's through Interstate 70. If you've never gone in that area before, it's truly like a one lane road going both ways, and it's cutting through a lot of Arizona, and it stays away from major cities and such. So you're like passing by like towns that, if I remember correctly, one of them was like population of like 748, and I'm just throwing out a number, but it was like something low like that. And that's all that there was like throughout the whole way. There was, I want to say, like five or six towns that I crossed through at some point, and I wish I stopped and took pictures because there were really like beautiful places over there. Especially there was one in particular I remember was called a Globe, and it was kind of like tucked in and in between the mountains. So like once you kind of get into that area, it starts to turn into like a winding path going through the city, and it was really beautiful out there. Like the architecture completely changes, and it's got more of that Hispanic kind of feel to it, Hispanic like Spanish style architecture, and it was really beautiful out there. And I remember when I at some point, like when you're getting out of the city, you're like going kind of up a hill. And it got really scary at that point because on the edge, it's just a cliff and it just drops down. So there's nothing there and there's no guardrails either. So I think the speed limit on that was like 45 or 50 or something like that. And I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to be going that speed. I'm going to go slower than that. And I remember there was a bunch of cars behind me that were, I'm sure they were pissed off at being behind me. But I mean, like, I'm new to the area. I'm riding a motorcycle. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I apologize. There was like every so often, there was like a lane that would open up on the street, and it would like allow people to pass each other safely without it like having to cross over to the opposite lane of traffic. And so people were utilizing that when they were behind me, I'm sure. But yeah, I was going up Interstate 70 almost the whole way, and it's called Country Road or something along those lines, and it surely does live up to its name. Very beautiful out there. At that point, yeah, like once I crossed through all the cities, I bypassed Phoenix, and I kind of went over and under until I got to the state park. As you're going in there, right across from the state park, or like where the grounds begin, it was this old, like, I guess it was the mining town that was there before, and they basically made it to like a tourist attraction almost because they repurposed a few of the buildings as like little gift shops. They had a saloon, of course, which I checked out. They had like a tour around the town itself, the gold mine. It was really beautiful. It was really cool too. It was a cool experience. I'm kind of rushing ahead here. There's one particular point that I wanted to mention. So while I was on my route to the state park, at some point I filled up gas, and this was inside the Apache Junction kind of reservation. And I didn't realize this until I got there. When I parked at this gas station, there was this basically a shopping center that looked like a movie theater. Yeah, it looked like a movie theater, and right next to it was this gas station. And so I was filling up gas, and this was probably going to be my last fill up until I get to the state park. So I went and grabbed like a few things from the store, and I come back, and this car pulls up at this point, and these two guys come out. One guy's filling gas, and the other one goes inside the gas station to just, I guess, grab some stuff. As I was walking back, I was filling up on my bike. I noticed that one of the guys was the guy that stayed back to fill up the gas was eyeballing me, and I kind of kept an eye on him because I am in a new place, and it's kind of is in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know if this guy was like gonna jump me or something like that. So I keep an eye on him. He comes up to me and he's looking at my license plate and he was like, "Oh, did you actually come from Texas?" I was like, "Yeah, I did." He's like, "Wow, that must have been a far drive." And I was like, "Yeah, it was." And he asked me what I was doing there or what I was doing here. And I was like, "Oh, I'm just planning on visiting the state park over there with the Superstitious Mountain." He's like, "Oh, it's really beautiful out there. I go like hiking every so often over there with my friends." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And he was like, I don't know how the conversation led to this, but at some point he mentions that he is Apache and he lives in the reservation. And I'm not going to say names just because, I'm keeping their identity confidential. I don't know if he would have been okay with me sharing this information. So I'm going to leave his name out. But he introduced himself. We talked a little bit and I told him my explicit interest in wanting to go to the reservation to just kind of like talk to like I don't know, like a village elder, or if they even still do that, just, someone of authority. And he was like, well, the reservation is not really a touristy place. And like tourists don't really go there. They don't even have a direct route that's going from like a major city over there. So like you would have to be driving there and only there. This was news to me. It, even though it wasn't going to damper my plans, was still kind of like, oh shoot, that sucks. But he asked me why I wanted to go. And I told him, I was like, well, I'm on a spiritual journey, let's say. I was telling him a little bit about my past. He was like, okay. But he's like, well, you seem like a really nice guy. The fact that you just happen to run into someone that lives in the reservation. Pretty much everybody knows everybody from there. So he was like, just go to this like trade/jewelry shop and just tell him, so and so sent you there. And I was like, oh, okay, I appreciate it. So we parted ways, took a couple of pictures with them, just so just to catalog in my trip. Made the rest of the way to the state park. I got there, I checked in. The lady that was checking me in, I want to say she was either a high schooler or in her early 20s. She was really young. She made a joke because she saw me in my leather jacket and my leather chaps. And she was like, "You are not dressed for the weather at all." And I looked at her, and I'm completely drenched in sweat too, because it's like 100 and something out there. And I laughed and I was like, "Oh, it's my natural habitat. It's okay. I'll be fine." And she starts kind of laughing and she was like, "Well, we have a bottle of water with you by any chance, and or like a canteen?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have one that I brought with me." And she was like, "Yeah, you're probably gonna be needing to fill that up a lot. So here's a map of like all the water stations in the park." And I laughed and I was like, "Oh, is it really that bad?" And she was like, "Oh, trust me, honey, like you're gonna be drinking a lot more water than you're imagining." And she was like, "Look at this chart." And I was looking at the chart that she was pointing at, and it said like if it had ranges of temperatures of the area, and it was like people would need to consume about this amount of water per hour to basically avoid like heat exhaustion or dehydration or anything. And I was like, oh shit, that's kind of serious. And so I, laughed it off, but I took the map from her just because I wanted to know like where the nearest, I guess, like bathroom was or something like that. They didn't have any. All they had in the area that I was in was basically like called the primitive campsite. So all they give you is just basically this bag, and you just do your business in this bag. And I thought that was interesting as well, because I mean, think about it. Like, I'm not in the middle of nowhere. This will be the first like campsite that, or actually the second campsite that just doesn't have like a ready like a restroom or anything like that. So you really are camping, or at least the area I was in, because you have to like, it's like a little bit of a walk. Luckily, that's not like how it was on the map. There actually was a but you can park, and I asked her about it and she said that I can park my motorcycle here and it's really close to the campsite. And so I was like, oh, perfect. There's a water station not too far from me that was really close walking distance. So I was like, perfect, this is amazing. So I got to my campsite, checked it out. It was a really beautiful spot that I picked. It was exactly like if I turn around, you got this beautiful desert scene, and I'll put the pictures on the video, of course. But you had this beautiful like picture of like the desert on one side of it, and then behind you was the mountain itself, and it's like the face of the mountain. Man, it was so nice looking at that. Like the entire, like every time I looked in that general direction, my brain wasn't processing the fact that I was there. It still looked like it was just like a wallpaper or something like that. It just didn't look real. But yeah, I set up my camp. As I was putting up the tent, I started to realize how hot it was getting, because I took off like all the like gear that I had on, and I just switched to like shorts and a tank top and flip flops, which of course, like, I had a lot of people looking at me, or I say a lot of people, the people that were there were kind of giving me weird glances. I didn't care. I was like, I'm comfortable with it. It's fine. The reason why was because of the wildlife there, which of course I didn't think about at the time. But yeah, so I'm setting up my tent, and at some point, like, my head's inside there for a while, and I peek out. And I'm starting to feel lightheaded. And I was like, man, it's hot out here. The sun's just directly up in the sky. And I can just see the heat wave from just like not even far distance. And I was like, oh shit. So yes, that chart that she showed me was not a lie. You are drinking a lot of water in a few hours. There's no natural shade either. So I made, like, out of this blanket that I'm sitting on, and I think it was like a couple of other things, I made this makeshift tarp that was attached to a cactus that was nearby my campsite. And I used that to like sit under so I could eat and just kind of sit down when I'm not being active. The nice thing about it is, so people in Texas would know when it's hot outside, it doesn't really matter if you're under shade, it's still hot. It's just a diet hot. Like, there's not that big of a temperature difference because of the like humidity around here. But in Arizona, since it's so dry and there's like hardly any humidity, when you go under the shade, it's actually a considerable amount of difference when it comes to the temperature. Like, it's still uncomfortable, but it's at least more bearable than what you're used to somewhere else. Like Texas, like, forget about it. But Arizona, I'm okay with it. And so I got the tarp set up and everything. And so I decided to just kind of I looked at the map that the lady provided for me, and I was looking at the nearest trails, and there was a couple of trails nearby. So I went for a quick walk. Of course, I didn't bring my water bottle or anything, and I'm walking in flip flops. But I was like, yeah, it's fun. We're here for fun. We're trying out new things. I go for a walk. I'm kind of taking some pictures along the path, but then I realized that the trail that I picked actually goes up to the mountain, and so I wanted to save that for another day. So I went back down. I was like, oh, I still got plenty of time left in the day. I'm just gonna go stop by the reservation and just knock that out of the itinerary. Got on the bike, pulled up my GPS, looked up the directions that was given to me by the guy that I met in the gas station, and I headed out. Anyone that's ever been to a reservation before, it's very bare, very simplistic living styles that I've noticed, but the people are very nice. Very, like, I don't think I have defensive way towards anyone that I was there. They're very kind people. And when I got there, I parked my bike and I went and started walking into the store. And was an older gentleman that was sitting at one of the chairs he was watching TV, but there was no one else in the store. And so I was kind of just looking around trying to see if I can find anybody. And the guy finally, like, he's like, you're from around here? And I was like, no, I'm looking for the owner to this shop. And I said his name. I was like, I'm looking for so-and-so. I ran into a friend of his earlier today when I was on my way here. And I told him my intentions and I wanted to go talk to somebody. So he introduces himself, happened to be him. And we started talking to each other a little bit. I was telling him basically what I'm telling y'all on the first day when I was getting out there. It was the first, or actually, sorry, it was the second day. It was basically up until I got to Odessa. I was telling him that story. And he was laughing the whole time. He was just saying, like, you don't run into a lot of people like that. And he said, you have a little bit of luck with you. And I was like, yeah, sure, if you want to call it that. Didn't feel lucky. He was really nice. After I was done telling him about the trip on my way here, he asked me, why are you visiting Arizona of all places? There's a lot of other places you could have visited, like, why here? And I told him the story. Only a few people know this. I went a lot of reasons. There was a traumatic experience in my life. I was going through a lot of things. I wanted to get some clarity in my life. For people that are going through those traumatic events, whether it be a breakup, of death in the family, really anything, sometimes the best thing to do is just have a hard reset. Either some people decide that they're going to pick up and move to a new city. Some people just pick up new hobbies. And for this one, for me, was a kind of a combination of those things. I'm not very a spiritual person prior to this trip. After the trip, I say confidently that I take more heed to those kinds of things. I had become a very spiritual person when it comes to that. It was an enlightening experience for me. And I'm telling this guy sort of a little bit about my past. And he's sitting there listening to me and he's just shaking his head. And once I was finished, he's looking at me and he was like, what is your plans for the rest of the day? And I was like, oh, I really didn't have anything planned today. It was just more of getting here and kind of getting settled and everything. And he was like, well, come back at around 6, 7 o'clock. He's like, just here's the address to my house. I'm having like a friends and family come over too. We're gonna have like dinner together, and I'd really like for you to join us. And I was like, I would be honored. I said my goodbyes. I said I'll see him around that time because I think when I got there it was like 1 or 2 o'clock, so there was still plenty of time left in the day. And so I came back to my campsite, and I just kind of was like, kind of cleaning up a little bit, putting my like personal belongings in my tent, just, grabbing anything that I felt like I needed to grab and just kind of relaxed for the rest of the time. Just really enjoying the ambiance, texting friends and family just to let them know I was okay. It was getting close to that time, so I headed back out onto the road and I pulled up to his house, and it was like almost like it was like these mobile homes that were spaced out like really far apart. Like you can kind of see them at the very distance of the area like was the next one. So it was very like spread apart. But I got there and I just saw like a shit ton of cars parked at this one house. And I was like, oh, it's got to be him. I was thinking maybe like a handful of people, not as many people as I thought that there was going to be there. But I knocked at his door. I guess it was one of his like cousins or something like that, from what I was told. But he answered the door, and he like had this like bewildered look on his face, like, who is this guy? Like, who are you? Like, I think you're lost. And I told him who I was and that, I spoke to so and so, and I was like, I was invited to for dinner, and he was just like, oh, come in, come in. They let me in, and like everybody was just kind of sitting around like in the living room, like almost in like a semicircle, and they all kind of just stopped and looked at me, and I just waved at them and just said hello. And so like they all got up and they started hugging me, and they just like was embracing me and everything, and they were all introducing themselves. And I felt so overwhelmed because I was like, I'm paying attention more to how like making sure I'm not saying my name wrong. And so I'm like completely like in one ear out the other where it comes to their names. And they don't have like crazy names either. Like I'm like not to say crazy like that. Like I just meant to say like it was just basic, like some like just regular names like John and something like that. They had like there was a few of them that did have tribal names, which was really cool. But they introduced themselves, and then I ran into, I want to call him, let's just call him like the village chief, I guess, just for the sake, because I don't want to throw out any names, but it'll be hard to kind of keep up with the story. The village chief came by, was introducing me to his family. I met his wife and his kids. They sat me down and we were talking for a little bit. And at some point, they were like, "Oh, we're about to start eating," but we went outside. So we went outside to their, I guess, call it backyard. It's just open land. I don't even know how many acres of land it was. While we're sitting out there, and they had this fire pit going. We were eating over there, and at some point, they're going around, kind of like just talking about like little, I guess, little stories for like the week, the stuff that they experienced, or they wanted to kind of talk about. It was very mundane things. It wasn't very serious. Some people were talking about serious things. Others were. It's kind of like when you're going around like at the end of like a Bible study, and some people are kind of like giving out prayers. It was kind of in the same sense along those lines. And it's getting dark. The village chief at some point, and I didn't even realize this because there was a big crowd of people circled around this campfire. They were passing around a peace pipe, taking hits of it, and I was like, oh shoot. And at some point, it got to me, and I looked at the village chief, and I was like, I really appreciate it, but I have to decline. I was like, unless y'all are okay with babysitting me, I can't stay. I'll have to ride back, and I don't want to ride back high. And so he laughed and he was like, "No, it's okay. You don't have to." He was like, just he handed me a drink instead. We had some beers. And so I had a couple of beers with them, and I think he had a hard whiskey too that was being passed around, and man, that thing almost knocked me out. Definitely, I couldn't remember what it was, but it was definitely strong. But yeah, so we're as the night's progressing, everyone's kind of loosening up from the drink. The village chief at some point was like, for everybody that knows or doesn't know, this is Maximus. He's coming from out of town. Doesn't tell him, or he doesn't tell the group exactly why I'm there in detail. He's just kind of giving like a brief synopsis of it. But then he wanted me to speak as well, and so I told, I introduced myself and I told him some reasons why I was here or how I was led here. And they're all listening quietly. And at some point, the village chief, he's telling me that, you don't have one spiritual journey and that's it. You start the path, but you don't finish it until, like later in life. You had to have something happen to your life Now you're opening yourself up to these things. And so that's why you're starting this journey, but it's not going to end here. The more you stay on your path, the more happier you feel, the more enlightened you would feel. And I'm taking this all in. I feel like just the whole situation itself, I was so like immersed in. I'm listening to him and I'm, really taking this to heart. And so everyone kind of splits off into their own little groups at this point. The younger like kids and other family members and friends were starting to leave at this point. So it was starting to get late. And so I was thinking about heading out myself. And the village chief like kind of told me to like hold on a second. Like, I still want to talk to you about some things. We were sitting there, just me and him, and we were just like staring out in the distance, just kind of watching the fire. He told me a lot about myself. He would have had to have known about me to begin with, which like to this day still blows my mind. I don't have the heart to say this. He told me about some things about my life that I was fully taken off guard, changed my perspective in some things. It still sticks with me to this day. It hasn't left my mind at all. But I really appreciated what he had to say. I feel like some people out there that are they're truly good and only want the best for you. These people that I met that day, just like the most genuine people I've ever met. After he was done kind of giving me his speech, he said, "I would really like to see you again. When are you leaving?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm leaving in like 2 more days." And he said, "On your last day, will you come back here? There's just something I want to give you." And I said, "Okay, sure, no problem." That was the end of that night. I said my goodbyes. I said goodbye to anybody else that was still there, and I went back to my campsite. I just was kind of still taking it all in. What he told me before I left really resonated with me, and so that night I stayed up whatever time it was. It was long. It was like long hours or many hours past the point. I was really thinking about the things that he was saying to me. I just was by myself. I grabbed some beers from him and I was just drinking by myself. I just had like a really it's like almost like meditation. I really cleared my mind. I've for once my head was clear. Yeah, I felt really good that night. I felt like I truly could sit there in complete silence and I'd be okay with it. Like it wasn't overwhelming anymore. At this point, get out of the seriousness. At this point, I've had a few too many drinks and started kind of getting tipsy. I looked out in the distance in the mountain, right? And I know I don't know if I was tripping, secondhand smoke, or just drunk. One of those things, both of those things. But I could swear on the face of the mountain, there was a light coming in the far east side of it. I shit you not, to this day, I saw a damn light up there. And I kept staring at it and I could swear I heard someone somewhere a campsite nearby me was saying the same thing, that they saw a light. But I only heard it really quickly, and it was just like a few seconds of them saying it. But I saw that light for a good while. It was freaking me out. I was like, there's someone out there, something's going on. But other than that, I didn't pay any mind to it. I'm continuing to have a few more drinks, and at this point, I'm plastered. Like, I'm not coherent at all. At some point, I thought it was a good idea to go hiking on this trail. At some point, I thought it was funny that I was going to go hike this trail that I saw earlier. I don't know how far I got, but at some point, I just sat down and I was just kind of looking up at the stars. And I was totally in the moment. I was eating it all up, taking it all in. And this was my first time. I don't want to say I passed out, but I fell asleep there because the next morning when I woke up, I looked around. I'm not in my tent. I'm in my clothes still, just laying on the ground. It wasn't morning, like the sun hasn't come up yet. I was like, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I can't believe I just went out in the middle of nowhere and just fell asleep right on the floor. That's how comfortable I was. And the whole trip so far wasn't especially the first night and all that. I guess just physically being there, knowing that the trip is over for the time being, I didn't have to worry about it. I just my body just went completely went into shutdown mode. I went back to my campsite, changed, and then I was like, I really want to go see the sunrise up at the mountain. So I quickly changed, grabbed some stuff, and I started heading out. And I followed the trail. And I think the hike distance wise about 2 to 3 miles. So it wasn't far. But I made it up to the mountain finally. And oh my god, the view up there was so beautiful. It completely like caught my breath. I just didn't process what was going on that morning. I was like, man, like you don't see shit like this in Dallas, and people see this like daily. Like they're so, I'm sure that they're so desensitized from it that they just don't look at it the same way that like new people do. But it was really beautiful. I didn't take any pictures because I really wanted to just take it all in, and I'm glad that I did because it makes me yearn to go back there from time to time just to revisit because of how beautiful that place was. After I was done kind of soaking it in, I was like, all right, I'm done for today. I'm gonna head back to the campsite, and that's where I'm gonna leave it off for next time. I appreciate you joining me for story time, and I will see you later.